Hello and good evening, Chicago. Welcome on in to another episode of Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio. So the bye week didn't result in a win for the Bears. The losing streak is still at 7 now. But all in all, that game felt good yesterday. Didn't it? Justin Fields, without any semblance of a professional wide receiving group, went out and went toe-to-toe with a guy that's probably going to win the MVP this year. That's encouraging. The secondary, against probably the best wide receiving group it has seen all season, held its own and made some plays. There was some good stuff yesterday in that Bears game. We're going to break that down. The Bulls and Blackhawks were also in action yesterday. They also lost. The Bulls, that's not a good thing. The Blackhawks, well, they're in full tank mode too, so that actually kind of helped them. We'll discuss that a little bit. Hot stove finally heated up in Chicago. The White Sox and the Cubs, both active with signings over the weekend. And then, with the holidays right around the corner and the Bills coming to town, it's a perfect opportunity for some story time this week. We will discuss all that and more coming up here on Chi-Town Weekly. Buckle it on up, everybody. Let's have fun. Hello and good evening to you all. I am Adam Karnick, host of Chi-Town Weekly, right here on IE Sports Radio. We're set to give you another hour of Chicago sports talk here tonight. Happy to be with you. Lots to go over tonight. Of course, we're going to be breaking down the Bears game from yesterday. The losing streak is 7. It's still active. It's yet another loss. But this one, hey, they weren't expected to win by any means. So to only lose by 5, we're going to take that. We're going to take that for what it is. I'm happy with it. All in all, I am happy with that. So we're going to be breaking that down. There was some stuff. The Bulls and the Blackhawks were both in action yesterday as well. We'll talk about that a little bit. Both the baseball teams in town finally made some signings. Thank goodness. So we're going to talk about, for a couple of teams that have been making it known that they're trying to be competitive this upcoming season. They both needed help. They finally recognized that and put their money where their mouth was a little bit. We'll be breaking that down. And then we've got something that's going to involve you, the listener. Yes, you listening live here tonight on Monday night, December 19th. You're going to get to interact with us a little bit. I'm going to ask you to interact with us a little bit live anyway, if you can. So we got a little bit of audience participation built up for tonight as well for the show. Lots to go over tonight. And of course, we have to start things off a little bit of homework to get things started off with our read. For the last 8.5 years, nearly 9 years now, IE Sports Radio has been continuing to bring amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans. And with your help, we are ready to take the next step. When you go to our website, iesportsradio.com, you'll see our Patreon link with 5 different tiers. The first one starts at just $5 a month. This donation gets you a shout-out on every one of our shows. Higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Thank you all very much for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. And want to shout out our Patreon supporters at this point: Bay Area Raised, Amlos Great, Key to the Gate, and anonymous. Thank you very much for your support. IE Sports Radio is, of course, available for you on all the social media platforms at IE Sports Radio. That's how you find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. This show is also available for you on Twitter at IESRC. We're available to you there. I am at Adam_Kernick on Twitter. And of course, if you are listening live here tonight on Monday night in Spreaker, hop on into the chat room. That's where we'll find Taryn Rodriguez is already there. He's always first into the chat room. Good evening, Taryn. We're going to try to have an awesome show tonight. Lots to go through. So hop on in, especially tonight, as we're going to be doing a little bit of an audience participation segment later on in the show. Don't worry, I'm going to give you some time to get prepped for it. Don't worry about it. We'll give you some time to get prepped. But since we're going to be doing a little bit of audience participation tonight, definitely hop on into the chat room in Spreaker. We can interact that way and have some fun. If you are listening to this later on in the week as a podcast, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of the other ways you can find it, thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Lots to go through tonight, so let's get started. Of course, we want to start off with the Bears game from yesterday. Heading into that game, I had zero expectations that they were actually going to win. And it's especially because a lot of the narrative was, well, you know, if you're gonna beat this team, you know, there's a certain formula you have to follow. All right, you know, the classic, if you're going to have a puncher's chance at beating a team that clearly outclasses you, there's a couple things that you have to do to make it happen, to make it work. And I'm pulling up the stats and figures right now because the Bears are so outclassed and outmatched that I'm pretty sure they did both of these things and still lost. The first thing is, well, you've got to win the turnover battle. You've got to win the turnover battle if you're going to pull off an upset. You cannot lose the turnover battle in a game where you're supposed to pull off the upset. Well, they were +2 in the turnover category, and they still lost. The other one, you've got to win the time of possession. Now, time of possession wound up being ridiculously close. The Bears did win it, but only by 14 seconds. It was 30 minutes and 7 seconds time of possession in favor of Chicago. Philly held the ball for just under 30 minutes, 29 minutes and 53 seconds. But at halftime, the Bears had held the ball for over 21 minutes. So in the second half, they only held the ball for about 9 minutes in the second half there. But still, that's a check by both boxes, and they still lost the game by 5. That gives you yet another indicator of just how outclassed the Bears are in basically every category. Save for one, though. Justin Fields just continues to be amazing and spectacular. That 39-yard run. At the start of the game, my wife and daughter were out doing some Christmas shopping, so I had the house to myself. So I was able to be a little more rowdy than I typically am during Bears games. That was a literal jump off the couch and start hollering at the television with that run. He could have been sacked 2 different times. Should have been sacked 2 different times on that play. Shakes that off, breaks another tackle, gets past another couple defenders, and was just a couple of inches from staying in bounds and turning that into a 48-yard touchdown run on a 2nd and 27 from midfield. And I loved Joe Davis on the call for Fox saying, if I'm the ref, I'm getting on the horn and I'm saying, all right, yes, he technically stepped out of bounds, but that run was so good, we're just going to give it to him anyway. Touchdown, Bears. That call, that play was just otherworldly. Stack it on all the otherworldly plays that he made. But also the passing game yesterday was excellent at stretches. And even more so when you consider what he had to work with. I feel a little bit like the street surgeon in Batman 1989, the first Michael Keaton movie, when he's operating on Joker and he could tell that it's gone horribly wrong, and so he's trying to save his own butt basically, and he turns to him and the nerves are severely damaged, and you see what I have to work with here, and he points at all these just mishmash of strange surgical-like objects on the table. I feel like that, talking about Justin Fields' passing game yesterday, here's what he had to work with going into the start of the game yesterday. And thanks to Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune for putting this together. Because, of course, Darnell Mooney's out on injured reserve. He's done for the year. We found out during the week that Chase Claypool wasn't going to play yesterday because of a knee injury he sustained against the Packers. And then we found out on game day that, N'Keal Harry also isn't going to play. He's dealing with a back injury. So here was the Bears receiving core going into yesterday. Equiminius St. Brown, Dante Pettis, Byron Pringle, Velus Jones, and Simba Webster combined rolled into one play. None of them had any more than 17 catches. None of them had any more than 2 touchdowns. All together rolled up as if they were one receiver that equaled 39 catches for 563 yards and 5 touchdowns. That was the entirety. Yes, Simba. Hello, Mike Pat. That was the entirety of the Bears wide receiving statistics going into yesterday's game. I went ahead and rolled all that and said, okay, if they were all just one random player in the NFL, how would that player rank? We'll name him Anthony Guy, or A Guy for short. 39 catches would rank him 80th in the NFL in catches. The 563 yards, that would be good for 50th in the NFL. And the 5 touchdown catches would have tied him with 3 or 4 other players for 21st in the NFL. And mind you, that isn't one player. That was the entirety of the Bears wide receiving core. And then Equiminius St. Brown goes down on the first drive. So there goes the quote-unquote best guy of the bunch immediately on the first drive. And Fields still managed to put together arguably the best game against the Eagles this season. 14 of 21 for 152 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. A quarterback rating of 119.5. Yes, he did take 6 sacks. as Mike Pat points out in the chat, and basically he's making my point for me here. The 21st in touchdowns isn't terrible, but no wonder Justin's been running around all over the place. Exactly. He had no one to throw to. Simba Webster had never caught a pass in an NFL game before yesterday. And frankly, his first one should have been ruled incomplete because he dropped it at the very end. And the only reason Philly didn't challenge was because it didn't matter. Velus Jones showed yet again that he cannot be trusted with the football in his hands. And yet Fields had, that 119.5 quarterback rating, I believe that's the best any quarterback has had in a single game against the Eagles this season. And I know it's better than what Kirk Cousins had a few weeks ago, or way back in week 2. One of the numerous Facebook groups I'm in that discusses Bears, somebody shared the stat. Here we go. Yeah. Here are some other quarterbacks against the Eagles this year. Kyler Murray, 80.5 passer rating. Aaron Rodgers, 95.8. Trevor Lawrence, who's been lighting things up as of late, 84.3. Kirk Cousins, 51.1 quarterback rating against the Eagles. Justin Fields, with that wide receiving core, had a quarterback rating of 120. Unbelievable. And that's not even touching all the running stuff. He becomes just the third quarterback ever to run for 1,000 yards in a season. And he talked about, after the game, yeah, it's great, but it's not what I want to be doing. I don't want to be running for 1,000 yards every season. I want to be throwing the ball more. He didn't take it this far, but it's easy to then finish the sentence for him and say, but he doesn't have anybody to throw to. There's literally nobody there of any consequence at the wide receiver position. The other part of yesterday that I do want to give some credit to, the secondary. My goodness. I know if you just look at the box score, you say, oh, Philly was able to pass the ball pretty well. Jalen Hurts, 315 yards. A.J. Brown, 9 catches, 181 yards. Devonta Smith, 126 yards on 5 catches. They did a pretty good job throwing the ball. That secondary played an amazing game yesterday. Jalen Johnson went on the radio today and talked about, A.J. Brown got 9 catches against me as Johnson shadowed him for basically the entire game until Johnson got hurt. Yeah, he got 9 catches, but that was on 16 targets. And a couple of those, Johnson had him blanketed. And it was a Herculean throw by Hurts that got it in there. It was a picture-perfect pass that got it into Hurts. Smith had one also where it was just like, all you could do is just tip your cap and say, hey, he put it the only place it could have gone to be completed. There's nothing you can do there. And no touchdowns throwing for Jalen Hurts. None of those wide receivers caught a touchdown pass. A.J. Brown nearly had one, but Jalen Johnson knocked it away recovered from getting beaten on the coverage and knocked it away to prevent a touchdown in the first half. This was an offense that was coming in. It was a given that the Eagles were going to put up 40, and they held them to 25 points. They weren't going to win that game, but that was a hell of a performance from the secondary. Kyler Gordon, that was the best game of his career to this point. He had a hell of a game. An interception, a fumble recovery, I want to pull up exactly how many passes he defended on that game. 4 tackles, 3 of them solo. Unfortunately, the stat sheet I'm looking at doesn't show his passes defended. There we go. Passes defended. He had a pass defended and he had an interception. Kyler Gordon easily had his best game as a pro, and he did it his first game back after a concussion. That was an amazing performance by Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson both. Just a terrific game. I know that it still goes down as a loss, but the fact that they were able to keep it to 5 was just fantastic. And an impressive game by the Bears. They also, with the loss, coupled that with the Broncos win, they're right back to holding the number 2 overall pick in April's draft. So for the tank season, that was a perfect tank win. Justin Fields continued to look amazing, and they moved up a spot in the draft position. They hold the number 2 overall pick. Lots that they could go there with that. All right. We need to go to our first break, but before we do, I ask something of you. Yes, you, the listener, as you are here. We're going to be talking later tonight. I'm going to be telling you, we're going to be telling some stories, but I don't want to just tell you mine. I want to hear some of yours a little bit. I want to know about the first time you ever went to a pro sporting event. If it was football, great. Basketball, great. Hockey, cool. If it was professional volleyball, as I know Taryn's hanging out in the chat, whatever it was, I want to hear about your first professional sporting event. What did you go see? Who took you? How old were you? What do you remember about it? So think on that. Put that into the chat room. I want to hear about everybody's first sporting event. We're gonna go through some of those later on in the show. Right now, we're gonna take a break, and then when we come back, we're gonna talk about some hot stove baseball stuff. This is Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hi everybody, it's Calvin here from USRN, here to give you an important message. Since 2017, we have done our absolute best to provide you with nothing but the highest quality of sports calls in the greatest of quantity possible. Thanks to you, our station has grown more than we ever thought. That's why, with your help, we would like to grow even further. Just think, twice the amount of your favorite calls, 24 hours of coverage, talk shows, play-by-play, game-by-game analysis, and so much more. That's right, USRN2 is officially in development, but we can't do it alone. We have set up a GoFundMe page that you can access from our homepage on the left of your screen. We also are planning special giveaways and prizes to our highest donors. Our goal here at USRN is to bring you the best calls possible at no cost to you. In order to continue to do that, we need your help now. Please check out our GoFundMe page, and if you would like to know how you can help, you can email usrnradio@gmail.com. Without your support, we couldn't do what we do.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Lava.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That gives you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS. The SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
The Spanish Top Flight is here on Wellington Sports Radio. From past champions like Barcelona and Atletico Madrid to current champions Real Madrid and every team in between trying to fight for Champions League glory and trying to fight against relegation. It's La Liga right here on Wellington Sports Radio.
And welcome back into Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Just had a good question come up in the chat while we were at break there. Does a minor league baseball game count as your first pro sporting event? I'm not going to be too picky tonight. If you want to count that, absolutely. I personally am not, but at the same time, if you want to count it, absolutely. I'm not going to tell you what wasn't a important sports moment for you in your fandom. So a couple of good ones in already. Mike Pat talking about a time going to a game, and then my mom throwing in one in the chat room. Talk with some details there. So we're going to get to that later. If you're late to the program and missed it, I want to hear about your first professional sports game that you were at. Want to know, who took you, what'd you go see, what do you remember from it, what did you take away from the experience? Because I'm going to be telling you about mine later on in the show a little bit. But before we get there, I do want to talk some baseball because both teams in town finally over the weekend, when it looked like, especially the Cubs, were going to just sit on their hands and do nothing both teams went out and made what are going to go down as huge moves for their respective franchises going forward. We'll start on the south side. We'll start with the White Sox, in part because their deal came down first, but also because it was the largest deal that Reinsdorf has ever handed out. It's the largest total money deal in White Sox history. Andrew Benintendi, the left-handed hitting outfielder, 5 years, $75 million. I love the move for the White Sox, and I know a lot of local Chicago sports people like it too. Your wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles, you're having a professional outfielder play in the outfield. We're not going to have Andrew Vaughn, a first baseman who's never played outfield before, racing around one of the corner outfield spots, trying in vain to catch what would regularly be routine fly ball outs for players. We're not going to have to continue the Eloy Jimenez experiment in left field anymore. Andrew Benintendi is an honest to goodness outfielder. Heck, he could play center if you wanted it. He's not going to. Hopefully Luis Robert is going to be out there for 150 games or so this season and manning center field. But Andrew Benintendi could absolutely play center field for you. He's going to be playing corner outfield, but you know that you're getting quality professional performance out there in the outfield. Of course, to get big money deals, of course, you need to be able to swing the bat as well. Benintendi was an all-star with the Royals last year. Slash line of 304, 373, 399 between the Royals and the Yankees. Not a ton of power, I know, but a table setter. The White Sox, in theory, if they're not having a hitting coach and a manager telling them that, you really shouldn't try to hit home runs. Home runs are a bad thing. We need to try to hit singles. Idiots. God, I am so glad that Tony La Russa is gone. Just, baseball has evolved since 1984, Tony. Deal with it. The Sox have enough power, potential in their lineup between Jimenez and Robert and Vaughn. They need table setters. Tim Anderson has shown he's not your prototypical leadoff guy because he doesn't walk a ton, but he's been a table setter at the number one spot. Benintendi is another table setter. He's a guy that you could put either leadoff or second, and he's going to get on base. He's going to be a guy that can run the bases effectively and efficiently so that when your power guys are coming up, they're coming up with men on base in scoring position so that they can do some damage. They can have an easier time scoring. So I love the signing for the White Sox. I really like the signing. But then the big one was on the north side of town. Now, we have to preface this because I still think the Cubs screwed up. Don't get me wrong here. The Cubs screwed up by not signing Carlos Correa. When Carlos Correa for the last couple of years has been talking about how much he would love to play in Chicago, and the Cubs made it very apparent that, yeah, Nico Horner played shortstop last year, but we view him more as a second baseman, and he's happy to go play second base. We've got an opening at shortstop. And Crane Kenny going on the radio and saying, oh, yeah, Jed Hoyer's got money to spend. Money's not going to be an object. He can go spend. And then they got outbid by San Francisco for Carlos Correa. What happened? How did that happen? That should never have happened. So the Cubs still screwed up, but at least they didn't screw up all the way and come away with nothing from this free agent, this excellent class of free agent shortstops. Dansby Swanson may not have been the guy I wanted coming out of this. I wanted Correa. Make no mistake about it. But Swanson is a huge upgrade at shortstop. And 7 years, $177 million. Yeah, it's a full no trade clause, so he's going to be there. Anymore, that's the price of playing poker for a superstar player in MLB. So I have no problems with the deal. I have no problems with the money. But they needed a better guy at shortstop. There were 4 huge free agents to go out and get, and they made sure they went and got one of them. So kudos to the Cubs. And then they backed it up by talking to Drew Smyly and getting him back into the pitching rotation too while they're at it. So some great moves from 2 teams that they want to tell us that, yeah, they're starting to be in ramp up and go for it mode. They finally showed us with their actions that it's go time. All right, we are going to take one more break, and then when we come back, I want to hear some of your stories. We've got a few stories in the chat. We've got some from social media that I got from quite a few Bears fans about some of their first times going to a game. And then I want to tell you about my first ever Bears game. Coming up next on the other side of this break here on Chi-Town Weekly on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
It's IE Sports Radio. It is your direct feed for all that is sports. It is Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris every Tuesday night right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris is the most comprehensive view on Philadelphia sports exclusively right here on IE Sports Radio. You know what it is, your direct feed for all that is sports. Tuesday night, IE Sports Radio, Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IU Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's going on, football fans? This is me, your boy Larry B, inviting you to join myself, Colin Reynolds, Mike Pat, and John Felipe for one of the most electrifying football shows you have ever heard. 3 and Out, right here at IE Sports Radio. Recap of the week before, a preview of what's to come, and of course, 3 hardcore head-to-head prime-time face-offs each week. You don't want to miss it.
Prime time is the right time to catch the top teams, the biggest superstars, and the best games in the NFL on USRN. Catch every Thursday, Sunday, and Monday night game this season on the networks of USRN.
Are you a fan of Buffalo sports? Are you thinking of changing loyalties and becoming a Buffalo sports fan? Do you even know where Buffalo is on the map? Did you know Canada is closer to Buffalo than New York City? Welcome to the Buffalo Huddle, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Patty Bax. This is a podcast designed for you, the passionate sports fan. I know you love your sports. Who doesn't? I cover Buffalo sports and so much more by bringing in the human elements. I call it Buffalo sports with a twist. Join me as we take a journey into the world of Buffalo sports. I guarantee you'll fall in love with Buffalo just like I did. Each week we start with an inspiration, question of the day, a Buffalo fun fact, and our weekly challenge to you, the listener. Come huddle up with me. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time for the Buffalo Huddle with Patty Bax on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. As we say in Buffalo, go Bills!
And welcome back into Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Story time here on Chi-Town Weekly. I wanted to hear from people what their first sporting event was. So I'm going to start with some of your stories here. We'll start with some things in the chat room. Mike Pat brought up one of his first sporting event was a minor league baseball game. Double-A minor league team, the Bowie Bay Sox, affiliate, of course, of his beloved Baltimore Orioles. His earliest memory was an eighth birthday party at the park. Mike got to announce a player's name, got some memorabilia, and his group wound up on the video board cheering for about 5 seconds. That sounds like an awesome time, Mike. Minor League Baseball is a ton of fun. The next story here in there is from my mom talking about going to a South Bend Silverhawks game in South Bend, Indiana. They are now the South Bend Cubs and are affiliate of the Chicago Cubs. They were They were for a time. They've bounced around quite a bit. They've been a single A affiliate of the White Sox, then the Arizona Diamondbacks for a very long time, then finally a single A affiliate of the Cubs. They're now actually a high A affiliate of the Chicago Cubs. I've been to quite a few Silverhawks games in my time. Mom brings up, confident that she had popcorn while she was at the game. That is almost a must when you're going to to any kind of event, basically, for my mom. As you can imagine, popcorn is involved in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And then Taryn brings up in the chat, first went to an AVP beach volleyball event. Day 2 of the tournament, Taryn had no idea which of the 4 matches going on to be paying attention to. So he watched as much as he could from each one of them, trying to get scores from the refs and other fans. Not easy. That would be something, trying to keep track of 4 separate matches all going on at once. Very, very cool stuff. Taryn, where was that? Where was that tournament? How were you able to keep track of everything? Were you able to keep track of everything on there? So I threw into a couple of groups, and I'm gonna bring up some stories from here real quick. Some of the groups that I'm in, a couple of Bears groups that I'm in on Facebook. I asked some of them about their first Bears game that they ever attended, and got some great ones. Some were as recently as this year. The Dolphins game, for example, was for some people. Got to watch Justin Fields break the single game rushing record for a quarterback. Some people, their first games for first Bears game was all the way back at Wrigley Field, back in the 60s. I can't imagine watching the Bears at Wrigley Field. That would have been just so different to watch a football game in a baseball stadium. One guy even brought up going to a preseason game in South Bend at Notre Dame. This tells you how old this fan is, because the Bears used to do their training camp. Now, this was back in the Papa Bear Hallis days. They did their training camp there on Notre Dame's campus and played some games there. Some of the other fun ones were when guys would bring up other games that I've been to. Nobody else brought up my first one, but my second and third Bears games got brought up by other fans of, yeah, that was my first one. And it was, oh my gosh, I remember that game. A game against the Saints in 2000 where it was in October, but it was an unseasonably cold October game. And Cade McNown got literally booed off the field by the fans. The fans were literally chanting for Jim Miller, the backup quarterback, to come in. I can vividly recall that. Another fan brought up a game. My mom will probably remember this one. Bears-Texans in 2002. I'm sorry, not 2002. In 2004. Bears-Texans, where the game it was the coldest game in Soldier Field history, where it was, I believe it was 15 or 20 degrees below freezing with the wind chill. We were sitting up in the 400 section, and I literally, when we got up to move after the game, I literally felt my heart beating against my chest. My chest felt like a rock, a frozen rock, that my heart was pounding up against. So it was fun reminiscing about some of these other games with other fans. So thank you guys for sharing some of these. Seth Eves jumped in also. His first pro game, Charlotte Hornets game in the 90s, going to an NBA game. That's a whole other thing. They're going to a pro basketball game. That's almost like going to a concert there with all the pregame festivities and all the crazy hype that goes on in those. Those are a whole other entity. Well, I wanted to tell you guys a story tonight of my first Bears game. It wasn't actually my first pro sporting event, but my first Bears game. December 7th, 1997. 25 years ago. I couldn't believe it when I realized that. And it was against the Buffalo Bills, their opponent this coming weekend, as the Bears wrap up their own personal Soldier Field Super Bowl preview edition here, hosting the Eagles yesterday and getting to host the Bills this week. And my mom jumping into the chat, yes, I remember that well. She could barely walk back to the from the stadium to the train station because she had so many layers of clothes on. Mom, you texted that into the chat. I can hear the lack of enthusiasm in your voice typing that. That was a cold. We got back to my uncle's car and it had frozen. We couldn't start his car. That's how cold it was that day. Brutal cold. Fortunately, this game, my first ever game, while it was December and while it snowed and while it was cold, it was magic to 10-year-old me. My uncle, my dad, and one of my uncle's friends were the other three in attendance from our group. And I remember my dad came up to me at some point in the summer. Now, at the time, I would always have a copy. Once it was announced, I always had a copy of the Bears' schedule week by week there on my desk. And he walks into my room, so I could reference it at any moment because, that's an important need-to-know thing when you're 10 years old. You've got to be able to answer who your team plays and when do they play them. This is must-know information here, especially when you're 10. And I remember my dad coming in and saying, "Hey, do the Bears play the Bills this year?" I was, "Well, let me look." And I turned and I knew right where it was on my desk, and I promptly grabbed I had cut it out of the newspaper. It was couldn't have been much more than like an inch tall of newspaper. I grabbed that clipping. And, well, yeah, they sure do. December 7th. Why? Because we're going to be going. And then he pulled out the tickets and showed them to me. I could have about melted at that moment. I was over the moon. He had worked things out with his brother, my uncle. My uncle is the reason I am a Chicago sports fan. Uncle Chris. He's the reason I am a Chicago fan like I am today. Dad had worked things out with little brother. They got the tickets. And we took in the train from Michigan City, Indiana, took the train into Chicago. And I just remember walking in and being a kid in a candy store. Here was this place that I had only ever seen on television. And now I get to experience it. I remember being fascinated by my uncle pointing out the rows upon rows of seats that were no longer in use at Soldier Field because, of course, at the time when it had been built, it was built for track and field and built for horse racing and things like that. And so there were a bunch of seats that once it became a full-time football field were just totally impractical because they were so far away from the action that they actually basically put up a partial barrier to block off those seats so they wouldn't be used anymore. But the seats, the bleachers were still there from it. And then we walk out, and of course, this is pre-rebuild, mind you. This is 1997. This is before the teardown and the spaceship version of Soldier Field that we see now. This is the same iteration of the stadium that Walter played in, that Mike Singletary played in, and those kinds of things. So some of the greats. And the four sections, if you will, the north, south, east, west, each side of the field had its own colors for the seats. You had blue, orange, green, and I'd have to look up what the fourth one was because I do not remember what the fourth color was, but they each were color coordinated. And we got to our seats. And now this is December. Now the Bears were coming into this at 2-11 on the season. It was a horrible season for the Bears. So suffice to say, it was not a sellout crowd that day. As a result, according to my uncle, we did not sit in our actual assigned seats. Our actual assigned seats would have been in about the corner of the end zone. About the corner, right in the corner of the north end zone. Instead, we sat still by that end zone, but closer to about the 15-yard line and maybe about 20 or so rows up. Because, well, those are bad seats. You can't see the game very well from there. And look at all the empty spots that are there. We'll be able to sit ourselves right here. And if somebody comes by with these tickets, we just say, oh, whoops, our mistake, and we go move to someplace else, wherever we want to sit. This is my uncle talking. It was magic. I was mesmerized. And to make it even better, the Bears won 20-3. It was, I can remember vividly, it was 17-3 at the half. And the Bears, shocked the Buffalo Bills, had come in. I've watched highlight reels from it. YouTube can be a wonderful thing sometimes. I've watched highlights from it. I was shocked to find out. I knew that Eric Kramer had started at quarterback for the Bears that day. I was shocked to find out that the starting quarterback for the Bills was one Todd Johnson. Now, the reason that name stuck out to me, Todd Johnson played quarterback for the Bears the last season the Bears won a playoff game. If that name Todd Johnson is ringing a bell for you, he was Jay Cutler's backup in 2010 when the Bears made it all the way to the NFC title game. And Todd Johnson came in relief of Cutler in the NFC title game when he got hurt right before halftime. Todd Johnson played most of the third quarter before finally being so miserable at it that Lovie Smith yanked him. And we went with the third stringer there for the rest of the game. We went with Caleb Haney the rest of the way. But Todd Johnson in 1997 was the starter for the Bills. He did not have a good day. He was 0 for his first 7 passing. And the Bears won the game 20-3. But with the Bills coming into town and playing this coming Saturday, and it being 25 years ago, I thought it would be kind of fun to tell the story of my first Bears game. This is also partially inspired by Patty Bax, who is our host of the Buffalo Huddle on Tuesdays. absolutely check out her show. She does an amazing job. Tuesdays at 6 o'clock Central Time here on Spreaker. She is an outstanding host. And listening to her show a couple of times, that inspired me to do a little bit more of a storytelling segment in the show here today. So thank you for indulging me a little bit as we got to take a little bit, everybody got to reminisce a little bit in the show today. That is going to do it for our show here tonight. Thank you, of course, to all of our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised, Emblos Great, Key to the Gate, and Anonymous for all of your continued support of not only this show, but of all the shows on the network. Thank you to Larry B. and all the hard work he does behind the scenes at IE Sports Radio. It goes noticed, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you to Taryn and to Mike Pat, Seth Eves, my mom, hanging out with us tonight, giving us stories, giving us feedback. A lot of fun tonight in the show. And be sure to stick around. Coming up next, Taryn Rodriguez will be live with Set Point. He'll be breaking down the NCAA Women's Indoor Volleyball Championship that went on last week. Texas, if I have it right, Texas won the Women's Volleyball Championship last week, so he'll be breaking that down. All kinds of other stuff going on his show tonight as well. For IE Sports Radio and for Chi-Town Weekly, I am Adam Karnick. Thank you so much for coming and listening every single week. I really do appreciate it. Everybody have a fantastic Christmas. We will talk next week. See you then.